So after getting about 20,000 requests, okay, I'm just kidding, but after getting tons of requests for more videos about teaching history vocabulary, your girl is finally coming through with more videos on teaching history vocabulary. So this video is actually a follow-up to a previous video I had made a while back about teaching history vocabulary, and I'll go ahead and link it up above and down below in the description for you to check out after you watch this video. I may decide to make this into a mini series, so if that's something that you're interested, be sure to comment Teacher's Lounge in the comments below. And meanwhile, check out this other video I have about teaching history vocabulary, and I'll also link it below. So welcome back, my teacher homies. If you're new to this corner of the internet, I'm Cecilia Tamez, and I am a social studies instructional strategist, and I want to help you feel competent and confident as you facilitate student-centered learning. Okay, now before we get the ball rolling, quick little side note, all these games and activities are assuming that you've already at least introduced the vocabulary to your students, like they've at least seen it, they know how to pronounce it, how to say it, they've gotten a definition for it, essentially. So this is maybe like through notes, direct instructions, guided flashcards. But if you're crunched for time, I got you, boo. All these games and activities are available at my website, thegameplanedusolutions.com. And as always, you can find a link to my website in the description of this video. So the first game I'm going to share with you for teaching history vocabulary in an interesting way is vocabulary scavenger hunts. So vocabulary scavenger hunts are really quick and easy to set up if you have all the materials prepared, but the game consists of the following. So you as the teacher are going to have the definitions of the vocabulary words for the unit that you want to introduce, and you want to go ahead and number your definitions, okay? And I would try to number at random, like let's say there's 33 vocabulary words, so I would number 1 through 33, but I would jumble up all the numbers. That way, obviously the students aren't going to scavenger hunt their terms in the same sequence in which you went over them in the notes, because then that's too easy. So anyway, you scramble the numbers. So each definition is assigned a number. I like to keep mine on sheet protectors because kids, you'll have that. Your students will have a handout, or if you didn't have time to prepare the handout, because it does happen, you can have them do this on notebook paper and number 1 through 33. And essentially all they're going to do for the vocabulary scavenger hunts is they're going to go around the room, because you will have taped your definitions all around the room, and they'll go around the room, and you can time this, or you can have students work on doing this as a warm-up or as an activity, or just whoever finishes first that has the most correct, you can do that. Using their scaffold if necessary, and that's a great idea if you have students that are learning English, if you have students that need special modifications, it's important to let them use these scaffolds, because it's still challenging as it is if you, for example, decide to time it. So again, they'll be using that to determine which definition, which word, which term is being described in the definition. So on slot number 33, they would write, legal according to the Constitution, that's going to be constitutional, okay? So they would write down for their word, constitutional. Yeah, a game like this is great for a class, like maybe in the morning when your students are still half asleep, or maybe after lunch when they start to feel sluggish. This is a great way to get your class moving around and re-engaged if movement re-engages your students. But if you notice that this is a great activity for your class, you can always do this same activity so that you don't have to be reintroducing a new process, a new game every single time for every single unit. You can use the same format and just switch out the vocabulary words and the terms, and do a scavenger hunt at the start of every unit. You know, max, they'll only do it about 12 times in the entire school year. Now, if you teach U.S. history from 1607 to 1877, I got you with the resources. If you teach a different social studies course and you would like for me to work on vocabulary games for your social studies content area, comment, "Give me more," and your social studies course, your grade level, and your state, because obviously the social studies course varies by state. The second game for teaching history vocabulary in an interesting way is a super simple concept I like to call the quizzing game. So for this game, ideally what you want to have prepped as a teacher is always a scaffold for your students. Typically the terms taped up on the wall in the form of a word wall, or maybe you don't have space in your classroom for a word wall, or you're a traveling teacher. If you've gone over the definitions with students in their interactive notebook, or they have some sort of notation that they can look off of, That's a great way to support students as they practice and learn this vocabulary. Now for this game, you'll need a timer, and I simply project it on my computer screen. I also highly recommend dry erase boards just because they're so practical and less wasteful than using actual paper. But in case you don't have this in your classroom because you're a new teacher or for whatever reason, you can always have students pull out a piece of scratch paper and play this game on scratch paper. And of course, don't forget your students need a scaffold, because this is what they're going to be using to quiz each other back and forth during the quizzing game. So the premise of the game is this. You set a timer to about 3 minutes. Now, depending on your student's ability, their student's language mastery, your student needs, you may want to experiment the first round with 3 minutes and then increase the time a little bit. Or if your students are getting a lot of words in and exchanging a lot of quiz questions, then maybe you can reduce the time as a challenge. But as a happy medium, I would start with about 3 minutes. During this time, students will take turns back and forth, giving each other the definition and their opponent giving the term. So let's say that you and I are playing, okay? I would give you this definition, okay? Remember, timer's on the screen, it's a 3-minute timer. And I would say to make an agreement in which both sides are happy. Now, I'm asking the question, you, partner B, is answering. The student who's answering cannot look at their notes, but you can look at your notes when you're the student asking the questions. Remember, if your students don't have notes that you gave them, ideally, hopefully you have the word wall the students can use for support. Now, let's say that you cannot get the answer in about 15 to 30 seconds, because remember, the rounds are only 3 minutes. So let's say you can't get the answer in that time. I'd like to challenge my students to try to get the answer in about 10 seconds. The student answering can use the word wall for support, but not their notes with the answers. And this is why on your word wall, you just want to have the terms by themselves. So our answer would be compromise. So just the word compromise and the visual for it would be visible on the word wall. But let's say that you didn't get the answer. You didn't answer in those 10, 15, 30 seconds. Then I, player 1, player A, I get to keep the point. But let's say you do get it right, then you get the point. And then we switch, and now it's your turn. So you're using your journal, your notes. It's your turn to ask to give me a definition, and I'm gonna try to tell you the word. And we do this for the duration of the 3 minutes. Now, when the timer rings, you want to make sure that you, as the facilitator, have a pre-arranged method of rotating partners, which you've previously discussed, disclosed, and explained to your students. Otherwise, you're gonna have a lot of chaos, and you're gonna eat up your instructional time just trying to get partners to rotate. So what I like to do is when we play this game, we more or less stay in a row formation. And so when it's time to rotate, I only rotate the students on one side of the row. The other row stays put so that we don't have, instead of having all 6 rows rotating, I only have 3 rows rotating at a time. It's a lot faster, a lot more seamless, and a lot more time efficient. And so you'll go on and play a second round, a third round, and then I like to do a final round, the championship round. So in this round, I always tell my students,
do not go home and tell your parents that we were gambling in school, okay?
This isn't Las Vegas. I tell them, but for this round, decide how much you and your partner want to wager. So we're gonna play it all for all because I need a top champion. So let's say that in all the rotations that I played, I have a total of 6 points, okay? So we'll do 5 and 6. And let's say that in your rotations, the max you got was 4. So when it comes time to make a wager about how much you want to play for, and let's say that I say, you know what, I want to go all in, the max that can be wagered is 4 points, because that's the most that you have to wager. Since you have the lowest number of points, that's the max amount we would be able to wager, okay? So we are playing for 4 points, winner of the final championship round. You're gambling all your points. When that last timer rings at the end of the championship round, usually I'll say, okay, which player has, and I'll start with a number, 5 points, okay? And I'll say, put your hands up. And I'll keep counting up the numbers until I only have 1 or 2 hands left. If I do, for whatever reason, happen to have a tie, I do a tiebreaker, just real quick then and there. I might ask a definition and they have to give me the word and they have to answer in 30 seconds. Or depending on how much time you have, you can have those 2 players play a match with you being the trivia master. Now, if you're a new teacher and you're not exactly sure which vocabulary words to introduce with which unit, don't fret. I do do have a vocabulary word starter pack with all the vocabulary words sorted into units available for the entire school year to download and print on my website. Again, if you want to see vocabulary for other history courses, don't forget to comment in the comments, give me more with your grade level, your social studies course, and the state. Now, the third way for teaching history vocabulary in an interesting way is a game I call the Class Matchup Challenge. Now, this is another really easy game. If you've been around here on this channel, you know that I'm not really a fan of entrance tickets or exit tickets. I would rather gamify those parts of class and have my students review in that way, or ask questions or observe what clarifications need to be made in that way. I might hand them a card and it could be the definition, it could be the word. If I have more vocabulary words than students, then I might have a designated table where I'll put the extra cards that are left over. And those will be just like little bonuses. You can also magnetize them on your dry erase board or tape them on the board, or you can also challenge certain learners with having more than one card. Now, there's several ways to logistically make this work depending on your class. If you have students with which you have good rapport, then if you want them to complete this activity before the tardy bell rings, you can hand them the card on their way in, and the minute they walk in, they set their stuff down and immediately they start looking for their partner. Or if you decide that you do not want students to start this activity without you being present to facilitate, you can instruct that students walk in and put their cards facing down and not show it to their neighbor, not discuss it with a neighbor. Now, you can make this a timed challenge where you set a stopwatch to see how long it takes the class to match up their pair. Once they have matched up to the other classmate that has the card, you can either have them stand in a circle next to each other around the classroom. You can have them tape the pairs or magnetize the pairs together, clip them and put them up there on the whiteboard, or set them on a table or wherever you have space. And you can make this a week-long challenge. Let's say that on Monday, first period, it took them 5 minutes to get all the words sorted. And then on Tuesday, their time improved and you keep recording that time. And so you want to see the class with the lowest average time of putting these flashcards together. If you have two classes that maybe have the same average time, you can see, okay, on average, which class got the most correct. And then the winning class can get some sort of incentive or prize or extra points or something. Or if you only want to make this a one-time challenge, you can also do this with a set time, like let's say 4 minutes, and then how many ever correct pairs they can get in that time. And then the class with the most correct pairs for that day would win. Now, if you'd like the vocabulary cards for this activity, which can coincidentally also be reused for other activities and games like trivia, my website has the vocabulary sets divided by unit, and they're also ideal for students who need additional scaffolding and support. The fourth history game you can play to teach history vocabulary in an interesting way is door trivia. Now, door trivia is something that I highly recommend for situations where maybe you're behind on curriculum, but you need to be reviewing vocabulary because you know that your students need it. And I actually do have a video about how you can review for state testing while moving forward in your curriculum, and I'll go ahead and link it up above and down below for you to watch. But essentially, you want to do door trivia every day. You want to do it consistently. You want to make it a routine, because usually when we don't make something consistent, that's when we have resistance from our students as to like,
Why do we have to do this? Miss, why?
and because if you didn't set it as something important enough that it needs to be done every day, students will start to question like, why are we doing it all of a sudden? So I would, from the start of the school year, make sure I get my students used to door trivia. The other thing is, in terms of retention, the repetition and the visuals that go with this vocabulary word are going to help your students with long-term retention. So this is how door trivia works. I essentially have, again, the scaffolded, the notes, the vocabulary notes that we did together in class that I introduced the unit with, and I'll have them with me at the door and I'll read them the definition and they try to give me the word. Now, if they don't know, I'll show them the flashcard that has the term and a visual image to help cue their memory. I may also resort to using body kinesthetic cues. Or if I don't have prepared flashcards or anything like that to show them, I might have them stick their head in the class and look at the word wall and be like, okay, I gave you this definition, go to the word wall and I want you to hunt it down. Which term am I talking about? And then you come back and let me know. So I do allow my students to always go use the word wall for support or as a scaffold. Now here's the trick with this. Let's say I have 33 words in the unit. Ideally, if my students are barely learning the terms, I want to try and stick to 5 to 8 words a day to go over. And then the next day, I'll go over those 5 or 10 words that we talked about, but I'll add a couple new ones, right? And so on until I can ask trivia from any of the 33 vocabulary words that we've been learning. Because that way, that 4th student can still hear what that 1st student answered. So even if they maybe don't know the definition themselves, they heard their classmates say it, right? So they might know what it is. Now you might be like, oh, Cecilia, that's cheating. Like their students aren't learning, but they're listening though. And they're participating. And over time, this is going to help their retention, whether they realize it or not. The other thing that this is going to do for your students is it's going to build confidence, because now when you're asking those questions in class, students will be like, oh, I heard that one during door trivia. And they just overall feel good about themselves. They feel like they know something, which enhances their participation and their engagement. Now you can easily make this a game by counting how many students missed their word. So let's say in a class of 25, you only had 2 students not get their word. And so you can keep a record of it and make it like a weekly challenge. Now there's a caveat. Vocabulary word walls do take a while to prepare and find relevant images to go with them and get them aligned to your unit. So if you do need vocabulary words or trivia cards to use for your door trivia, don't forget, I got you covered. Details are on my website. Now, so far we've been focusing on games that help student retention, that are great for students who need additional scaffolding, that need additional repetition. But what about a game for students that are more advanced? Something that's going to challenge them. The 5th game to help you teach history vocabulary in an interesting way is something I like to call Fantastic Fours. Because guess what? This is a collaborative group activity in groups of 4. Now, this particular game is great for teachers that need to gamify writing and need to go over vocabulary. So, as the name of the game implies, your students are seated in groups of 4. They can be seated in rows, they can be seated in little groups like a little square. Now, on the board, you as the facilitator would write the prompt, the theme, the topic, the thesis question, the era. You're also going to set a 5-minute timer up on your screen or maybe at your desk or on your cell phone, along with a list of vocabulary words that you expect students to use within their writing. So this is not, I know the word and I know its definition. No, I can actually contextualize it while or in a written response. Don't forget that we still want to support even our advanced learners. So you can have your word wall posted. You can allow students to look at that, or you can allow students to use their vocabulary journal notes as they write, just so that they can properly contextualize the word within their writing. And again, this is going to help them just feel a little bit more confident as they complete this activity, because writing and having it be, a timed activity perhaps is always challenging in itself. So we want to make sure that we support students so this activity doesn't, shut them down or rattle their confidence. Now, depending on your student group, so you may have to gauge this, but a recommended start time would be 5 minutes minimum. Depending on how your students do and what you observe, you may increase the time to a 7-minute round or an 8-minute round. But what students will do is actually start a response. So let me give you a sample prompt. I might say, imagine that you are a person living during Shays' Rebellion. Explain or write a story from the perspective of one of the farmers that explains why the Constitution of the United States was instituted to replace the Articles. And then their list of words, so maybe, 10 vocabulary words that I want them to focus on, maybe words they've been missing or that they struggle with. Again, even in these games, you always have room to be intentional. And then the timer set, and each student on their own sheet of paper will start a story or a response, right? They'll start writing their answer. That timer rings, they're going to rotate the paper to the person next to them. They get the paper from their neighbor and they have a couple seconds to read, and then we start the timer. They're going to continue where their partner left off. And I know sometimes assigning an essay or a short answer response for students to write is always a struggle, because maybe their weak point is, well, I don't know how to start my answer, or I don't know how to wrap it up. And so in this way, you could literally create a fun environment in which students are helping each other and self-correcting. If they see something in the story that doesn't make sense, they might continue the story to switch it up a little so that it makes historical sense or so that the word is used correctly. And so after these 4 rotations, papers will be collected. And for fun, I like to draw out some stories. So I might put them in a box, in a clear box, pull out random stories to read. If your students need to write, for example, thesis responses, you can have your students rate it, and based on the rating that the class gives, that particular group can win the top prize or the top extra credit points or whatever. You can also tape the stories or post the stories around the classroom and have the students read it, and the top story voted by peers wins, but it has to meet the criteria. Or you can always read the responses and select the most complete and maybe most creative written response. So again, there's many ways to gamify even written answers. Now, if you want written prompts for your history course for this game, comment Fantastic Four, give me more. And of course, your history course, your grade level, and your state. Now, if you found this video helpful and you want to support the work that I do, please help me help other teachers by liking and subscribing and sharing with a teacher friend. You know I'm rooting for you. Until next time, class dismissed.